Hello, everyone. So before we do anything else, there's only two of us here. So we've seen and read kind of the stories that we have each shared. But it's just something to ponder, really. And feel free to share your thoughts on this or not, as you're most comfortable. I particularly want to point out this kind of second set of questions. Or second question. So what did you learn from the stories shared by the people around you? So even in just this really, really short time, so what, 5 minutes or so, as we're kind of, waiting for the workshop to get started, we've learned quite a bit about each other. We've learned that we all have a really hard time picking a favorite story, which is, an important thing to know about ourselves and about others. We have learned some things about kind of what we value, the stories that are important to us, from my tortoise and the hare, kind of remembrance from childhood, from Michelle's memory of seeing her aunt dressed up when she was a little kid. Oh, and Veronica has put something in the chat of how La Llorona was an interesting tale, and she has memories of her mom telling her that story. Also scary tales like the Telltale Heart. Oh yeah, scary stories are the best. I love scary stories if they're written or if they're audio, but if they're on film, they're a bit too much for me. But yes, so stories that are perhaps maybe a little bit difficult to hear sometimes can be comforting or, help us understand things about ourselves and the people around us a bit better. So stories are really powerful. I think we can probably all agree on that. Whatever that story is, when someone shares a story with you, they're telling you a bit about themselves. And kind of vice versa. When you listen to a story, you're learning a bit about a person. And that's essentially what we're going to be doing today. I won't read out this whole quote. It's always a little bit awkward to read out quotes on Zoom. But I really, really love this quote. It's by Rebecca Solnit. She's an author, mainly in creative nonfiction, although I think she writes a little bit of fiction as well. And this is a quote from her book, The Faraway Nearby, which is about a lot of things, but it's about stories, partly. And I really connect with this quote, particularly the kind of last sentence. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear them, to question them, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. And I think that perhaps sometimes when we kind of think, oh no, I need to become a storyteller, it can be a little bit intimidating. We've all likely met really kind of talented storytellers in our lives. And a really kind of talented storyteller is really kind of a tour de force to listen to. And sometimes we may feel that like, oh, my stories aren't like that. They don't draw people in like that, but they very much definitely can. And storytelling is for everyone, and everyone approaches it in different ways. And what I'm hoping this workshop will do will be to help you facilitate storytelling and story listening in your own classroom, and also, beyond, hopefully too. So let us continue on. Okay, a quick lesson overview. So in this standalone lesson, students will explore and practice the art of speaking and listening, both in the context of storytelling. I should say here that story mapping is not a part of this lesson, but it definitely can be. If you're not kind of aware what story mapping is, it's essentially what it says on the tin. You kind of plan out your story, the beginning, the introduction, the climax, and then the kind of resolution at the end. That's really important too, but this lesson doesn't necessarily focus on that. Although it can be, you can definitely incorporate if you so wish. This lesson is easily adaptable to a range of contexts and subject matters. So whatever kind of content type or subject type you teach, this lesson can be adapted to fit that. And same with kind of different age levels, from elementary all the way up to adults. And this lesson is a great opportunity to incorporate elements of cultural heritage into the classroom. Many cultures worldwide have strong oral storytelling traditions. And again, depending on the background of your students, depending on what subject you teach, you can definitely incorporate elements of kind of different cultural ways of storytelling worldwide. And then finally, last bit of info. This lesson covers a 45 to 60-minute class block. It's a little bit extended for our purposes here today in this workshop, but you can definitely make it longer, shorter, depending on kind of how much time you have. So let us continue on. Oh, it lets me. There we go. Okay, so a quick do now. Now, the lesson plan has a few kind of suggested do now questions. I've listed a few of them here. Again, very adaptable lesson. You can kind of take it any way you wish. And we're gonna kind of today run through the lesson plan from start to finish with some adaptations, of course, given that we are meeting on Zoom and given that there's 4 of us here in the Zoom right now. So before we get started, as you would when you start a class, a think now question. The one that's highlighted there, sorry, there we go. How can we best tell our stories? Is one that I'd like us to kind of think about right now. So how can we best tell our stories? There's no right or wrong answer to this question. You may answer in the chat box. You may answer out loud. You may, I don't know, do an interpretive dance if you so feel moved. Whichever way you would like to answer this question is the correct way. So how can we best tell our stories? What do we need to do in order to tell our stories? Take a few seconds to think about it. Feel free to talk out loud or put in the chat box whenever you're ready.
How can we best tell our story? We should write or speak? Speak?
Whichever you prefer, really. Go for it. There's only a few of us here, so definitely feel free to just unmute.
So I think that I've used storytelling. I'm a Spanish teacher, and I've used storytelling in just kind of my way in my career that I just did naturally. And I pretty much would start most of my classes off with some kind of story from my life. And I think that the challenge in second language learning is to, of course, you want the students to understand what you're saying. And so you need to have some kind of beginning of the story that will somehow be comprehensible input. And then it's just got to have some kind of, what do you call it? Like something that grabs them. There's a word for that.
A hook?
A hook. Yeah, it has to have a hook. Like a story without a hook doesn't work so well. And so one of the things that I used to have, I did a whole lesson around this when I was teaching the imperfect and the preterite, is I would tell the story of Cinderella, but I would tell it in the first person, like it happened to me. And I would start speaking and I would, give a really kind of long out version and how difficult my life was. And then after like halfway into the story, like one student would be like, and then there would be like 2 and 3 and then 4. And then they would just start laughing because they really thought that I was, and it did backfire one time that I had a student get kind of upset. And, she was like, your mom died when you were a little kid. And I'm like, no, actually. So it was one of my funnest things to do in class.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that approach on so many different levels. I love the telling the story of Cinderella as if you were Cinderella. That would draw me in, and I'm sure the students were drawn in as well. And thank you as well for mentioning kind of the hook, something to kind of get people interested, like a story appetizer. I agree also that kind of setting the stage or setting the context of the story, especially in a foreign language classroom, super important. So that students can understand, what stories are being told and how they're being told. Thank you so much. Veronica, I think you're in a bus, perhaps. If you're able to answer, I would love to hear, but feel like if you can't, that's totally fine.
No, I'm actually at my son's karate, so I came out to the car in case I had to speak because this class happened to be at the same time as their karate. But I think the best way to tell our stories is to be authentic and to like really be interested in the story ourselves. Like obviously I'm a pre-K teacher, so I have to tell every story with gusto, and there's visuals and there's movements and things like that to get the kids captivated and engaged and keep them from misbehaving, basically. Because the more that they like the story, the more they get involved and the more they pay attention and the more they get from it. A lot of the students in my class, I have 10 students in my class right now, and 6 of them are not native English speakers. So a lot of the stories that we tell, like I said, lots of visuals, realia, full body movements, all kinds of things like that. And like, especially stories that have like songs or rhythms embedded into them or poems. Like right now we're doing the Gingerbread Man, and they really get into the rhythm of the language of that story. So
I have a question, Veronica. Are you teaching a bilingual class, or do you just teach in English?
I don't speak Spanish very well. And so that's been something that I wish that I could do because my school is actually bilingual. And starting in kindergarten, the kids, it's like 90-10, and then it goes up to 80-20 and continues on until 5th grade when it's like 50-50. So in pre-K, I only teach in English, but if I had the capability, they would allow me to do bilingual. And a lot of my kids, like I say that they don't speak English as a first language. It's not just Spanish. Like I have one who speaks Arabic, one who speaks Swahili, one who speaks Nepali, I think.
Oh, such diversity.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's interesting.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that, Veronica. I really like how you incorporate kind of the different senses into storytelling as well. You mentioned movement, storytelling, or kind of verbal stories and movement. I love that combo. There's something about kind of like acting out a story that at least makes me feel like a kid again. And so it's so lovely to hear that you're incorporating that in your classroom. And as well as, like you say, the importance of setting the stage quite well. Because stories can make us really excited. And, if we're kind of if we're teaching younger students or older students, depending, that can sometimes, perhaps move towards chaos if not well managed. And so thank you both of you for your excellent answers. All the things you mentioned, so important. I'm just going to add 2 things, especially in the context of this particular lesson plan. So telling and listening to a story can at points be challenging on like many different levels. As a listener, having to kind of stay attentive and stay listening, especially perhaps for longer stories, can be a challenge for all of us, not just for our students. And explaining that and kind of setting the stage in that way for students before the lesson begins is of course very important, like you both mentioned. And also, especially in the context of this particular lesson, there's no real right or wrong way to tell a story, especially kind of a personal story. As long as respect is maintained by both the teller and the listener, that's pretty much kind of the base level what you need to facilitate a storytelling lesson. Now, of course, you can definitely kind of incorporate, like I mentioned, things like story mapping to kind of develop or help develop student storytelling skills. But at the end of the day, the kind of base levels of stories is someone telling one and someone listening to one. And there's loads and loads of different ways of doing that. So all this to say, and this is kind of related to what you both have shared, setting classroom norms obviously is very important, kind of like all the time, but especially in such a lesson where there's a lot of talking, there's perhaps a lot of noise, perhaps a bit of distraction. Setting norms for kind of, what is respectful behavior? What is respectful listening? What is respectful language? Very important. Especially depending on the prompt that you use. Perhaps using a more personal prompt might, enact feelings of vulnerability in your students or in yourself. And so setting these kind of classroom norms, super, super important. So all this to say, let's listen to a story. So as we listen to the next story, I'm not going to tell this one. I'm going to let Hourglass from This American Life tell this one. But as we listen to the next story, think about a couple things. What story is being told? What images come to mind when you hear the story? What emotions come to mind when you hear the story? What memories of your own come to mind when you hear the story? And I say you can turn off your camera if that's more comfortable, just because I know that sometimes, at least in my own experience, when sharing audio on Zoom, it can be kind of awkward when you're listening to the story and you're just like looking at everyone's face, also listening to the story. So if you would like to turn your camera off, you can definitely do that. And so we are going to listen to a short story, 5 minutes long-ish, from This American Life, from an episode called Middle School. And we're going to listen to the prologue. Now, this is always exciting on Zoom because I always never know whether I've shared my audio correctly. So bear with me as I make sure that we can all hear this. So I'm going to start playing it now. If you could just let me know in the chat box whether you can hear it or not. And if you can't, don't worry, I will figure it out. I'm going to mute myself so it doesn't come through on my speakers.
Hey everybody, Hourglass here. So I got this email at our radio show near the end of the last school year from a 14-year-old.
Hello?
Hey, is this Annie?
Yeah.
I called her up at her house in California and asked her to read it.
It says, Dear This American Life, I just escaped the whitewashed, brick-walled, iron-gated prison that is commonly known as middle school, and I'm finally out for good. But in all the time I've listened to your show, I have never heard an episode devoted to what goes on inside the walls of a middle school. I hope you'll think about it. Anonymous?
Yeah, you signed it anonymous, but then you actually, your email was signed with your name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had said anonymous because in middle school everybody's so judgmental, and I didn't want the kids to judge me or anything if they heard me on the radio.
Mainly she says that she wrote to us because she and her friends were talking, right after they left 8th grade, about how terrible middle school was. And she wondered, was it just as bad for other people as it was for them?
Yeah, you always wonder whether other people are going through the same thing as you. And it'd be cool to hear other people's stories about it and what they went through.
And if you had to explain to somebody, what are the worst things about middle school, can I ask you to just walk me through it? What is so bad about middle school?
Kids there are all in kind of socially awkward stages that the drama every day can be frustrating, and girl-boy things, or if someone likes so-and-so, and then no matter who you are or what you do, you'll get made fun of for it. Anything in the world you can get made fun of for.
In Annie's case, she had friends who smoked, so she got criticized for smoking. But then she also was made fun of for not smoking, for being too much of a sissy to start smoking. She was made fun of for coming from a bilingual elementary school where everybody learned to speak Spanish and spoke it throughout the day.
And leaving elementary school, I guess I thought that when I got to middle school, everyone would think it was really cool that I spoke Spanish, but when I got there, they mostly just thought it was dumb. I don't know if they were jealous or what, but they would make fun of me for it. Then they'd say we were all full of ourselves for that we spoke different languages and stuff.
Did it make you feel bad?
Yeah, I didn't want to stick out in that way. if I got a new sweater or something, say for Christmas that I really liked, and I would really want to wear it to school or something, but I'd be nervous because, like, what if someone didn't like my sweater or someone made fun of me for wearing it? It can be hard to do even the smallest things because you're so nervous that people tease you or judge you from it.
That sweater example, is that a real example?
Yeah, it actually is. I worried about it so much. I also had a pair of moccasins that I'd never worn, and they're kind of my signature now. Everybody really likes them. They're like ankle-high lace-up moccasins.
And how long did you have the moccasins before you actually wore them?
A few months, like probably 2 months. I guess I just thought if people didn't like them, they would all make fun of me for wearing them. And I didn't want to stand out that much.
What could be done to make middle school better?
I don't think you can really do anything about it. Nothing.
We talked about this for a little while. She said basically, everybody comes into middle school as a little kid. And then you're going to have to grow up and figure out who's in what group and who you are and who's above who. And you'd have to figure that out somewhere at that age, right? Might as well be middle school. It was terrible, she says. But now she's in high school.
Whatever middle school was, it worked. Everyone's a lot friendlier, and everyone's lives are a lot better now.
Well, today on our radio program for Annie, we look at whatever it is that happens in those mysterious years that we call middle school. We have stories today from all over the country, people lurching their way through these years when you're figuring out so much. We go to middle school dances and classrooms and down to the Mexican border. From WBEZ Chicago, it's This American Life. I'm Ira Glass. Stay with us.
All righty. So before we do anything else, I'm just going to put the link to this particular episode in the chat in case anyone wants to listen further. It is a really lovely episode. Well, I think it's a really lovely episode. Okay, so obviously that kind of form of storytelling, slightly different, perhaps, than what we're going to be doing today. More of an interview. But there were some really poignant things shared, at least for me. And I was jotting down some notes as we were listening. And so take 30 seconds, minute or so, and just have a think. There's loads of questions on the PowerPoint. What stories being told? What images come to mind? What emotions come to mind? What memories of your own come to mind when you hear the story? Feel free to answer all of them. Feel free to answer just a few. Feel free to not answer any of them. I just want us to take a few minutes to kind of think about what that particular story brought up in our own minds. You can answer verbally if you wish. You can type in the chat box. If you're answering verbally, feel free to just unmute yourself. Again, there's only a few of us here, so feel free to speak out loud whenever you wish. It's about 30 seconds. What images, emotions, memories came to mind? What story was being told?
Michelle, you can go ahead and just express.
Okay, well, I went to middle school. Well, it was junior high, and my daughter also went to middle school, and I taught middle school for many years. And I think what I realized actually just in this class is that I wasn't proactive enough, knowing kind of how crazy middle schoolers feel. And my philosophy was always just to treat them with loving kindness and respect. And that's what I did. But I think that even though I knew that, I remember sometimes the head of my school would talk about like kids in middle school, like actually entering a mental illness. Like they're just not the same as they were. And I kind of want to figure out, you know, what it is that you do in order to like make the kids feel more comfortable, something more than my basic, just like treating them like adults. I would treat them like adults. Yeah. And as far as emotions that come to mind, I mean, I had trauma in, I mean, everybody I know had trauma in middle school. And I really believe that the adults could have and could now do more things in order to help that that feeling that is so pretty universal.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Michelle. That's I connected with a lot of what you said there. I also used to teach middle school, and I had the same thought when I listened to this story the first time. It makes me realize, you know, there's that quote, and I can't remember who said it, but like the past is a foreign country or something like that. I feel like it's a quite famous quote. I have no idea who said it. If someone knows, please let me know. But that kind of phrase came to mind when I was listening to this the first time, because like you mentioned, middle school is a pretty traumatic time for so many of us. And then we kind of grow up and we remember that it was traumatic, but it's not as kind of sharp anymore. Obviously, we're not living through it. But then how do we translate kind of that memory and that experience into helping our students navigate that traumatic time? Yeah. It's a tricky thing to answer. And of course, the answer will probably be different for, you know, each individual student, each individual teacher. But also, especially what you mentioned of you know, doing one's best to treat them, you know, with love and kindness, and almost hoping at the back of your heads that that's enough, but also knowing that it's very much not. Yeah, middle school is a turbulent time. I was typing some stuff into, and Veronica, I just seen that you put something in the chat. I was typing out some emotions that kind of came to mind when I was listening to this. And then one of the first ones that comes to my mind is awkwardness. Like, I just remember middle school being so awkward, like not knowing like what is the correct way to do things. And it's probably something that's, you know, especially if you're doing this sort of activity with middle schoolers, definitely something to keep in mind. As the guest in that podcast mentioned, middle schoolers can be quite cruel at points. No matter what you do, it is the incorrect thing to be doing. And perhaps, you know, something like a storytelling activity might be difficult, especially in kind of that age context. So something to keep in mind. But emotions that came to my mind were awkwardness. I was definitely thinking of memories of both myself being in middle school and also teaching middle school, the kind of duality of that, of being on both sides of that story. Veronica, I'm just reading what you put in the chat. Oh, you say, I can relate to feeling judged and feeling like I couldn't always be myself. I was also thinking that my son is about to go to middle school and worrying about how he will feel and how to best support him. Yes. All. Thank you very much for sharing that, Veronica. I also remember feeling judged, and also kind of, you know, as I think we've all mentioned, the knowing what it was like and trying to think about ways that we can prevent it from being perhaps so traumatic for those we care for. Thank you very much, both of you. Like I mentioned, the link to that episode is in the chat box. It's really wonderful. I mean, I think it's wonderful. It's kind of interesting listening. It's one of those This American Life episodes that you kind of, at least for me, you think about for ages afterwards, especially being an educator. Thank you very much, both of you. So we've just listened to a story. We had some thoughts. we shared them, is essentially what in this lesson your students will be doing. So moving on, we are going to start things off. So in this lesson, kind of the first thing, well, not the first thing, one of the first things you do before the students themselves tell their story is that you, as the educator, if you're comfortable, tell the story. Now, if you're not comfortable doing this, of course, you can, share a podcast episode, share an oral history interview, share perhaps a TED Talk. Those are definitely stories too. But at least when I was in the classroom, I enjoyed sharing my own verbal story in response to a prompt. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to share a story in response to a prompt. And then while I'm doing that, and this is virtual, so it might be a bit clunky, but we're going to try our best. We are I'm not going to, but Michelle and Veronica, you are going to draw what comes to mind while I'm telling my story. So I should say, ostensibly, officially, this is kind of a drawing exercise, and we're going to do it virtually on a Jamboard, and I'll share the link in just 1 second. Although, to be fair, there's only 2 of us here. So maybe we could even do it on paper if both of you wanted. That is an option. Ostensibly, if we were doing this in person, it would obviously be on paper. But we can do it virtually, or we can do the drawing on paper. So let me take a quick poll. Since we're such a small group, would Michelle and Veronica, would you prefer to do the drawing on the Jamboard, or would you prefer to do the drawing on paper?
I'm good either way.
Okay. I don't have paper. I can use Apple Notes. Okay. No, that's fair enough. Let's do it virtually then, so we can all kind of see it a little bit better.
And I just wanted to tell you guys that I am recovering from a back surgery, and that is why I'm laying on the couch just in case you were wondering about my angle. But I want to have my camera on, but I just wanted to let you know that's why I'm doing that.
No worries at all. No worries at all. I hope the recovery is going well.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. However you're most comfortable. I'm kind of, I would like to be lying on the couch too. But thank you very much for letting us know. Where was I? Oh yes. I'm going to tell a very short story. I've got a visual as well that you'll see in 1 second. But while I'm telling the story, you both are going to, and let me put it in the chat box, be using a Jamboard to draw what comes to mind when you hear my story. Now, I say draw, but if you would like to type things out instead, you can totally do that. As you draw, if you're drawing things that look like actual figures, that's great. If you're just kind of getting responses of like colors or shapes and you want to draw that, you can do that too. Again, there's really kind of no right or wrong way to do this. Because essentially this is what your students will be doing too. So as the story is told, your students will draw or take notes or, scribble or, I don't know, you put colors on a page in response to the story that is being told. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And very important, there's no need to ensure that your students, or indeed you guys, draw everything that is occurring. The point of this exercise is not to kind of summarize the story in drawing. It's just to kind of let the story pass into our brain through our ears and then out our hands, or indeed our computer cursor in this particular instance. Listening is the most important thing. So if for you personally, you can only listen and maybe draw lines of different colors, that's totally cool. If your preferred response is to listen and to draw one aspect of the story in great detail, that's totally cool too. If your response is to listen to the story and then put little things on the Jamboard sticky notes, that particularly resonated with you, maybe phrases or images or emotions that come to mind, totally cool too. Essentially, all this to say, no right or wrong way to do this. So before we jump into that, because we're virtual and these transitions are always slightly clunky. Any questions? Yes, Michelle, go for it.
So I clicked on the Jamboard and then it
Mm.
said, accept your invitation, but then it didn't really go anywhere.
Oh,
That's what it was doing for me too. I included a new link.
Okay, let me
See
try
if
the
that one
new-
works, Michelle.
The new link is, there we go, where it says
Okay.
everyone together.
yes. Excellent.
And I should be able to draw on here. Okay, I'll do my best.
Yes, do your best. It's you know, it's chill. There's, you know,
Okay.
we're not, I mean, I'm definitely not the next Da Vinci by any means. And so you guys definitely don't need to be too. Just a quick kind of question before we get started. And I apologize, I should have asked at the beginning. Have we all used Jamboard before?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Veronica, have you used Jamboard before? Yes? Okay. Okay, I think you're, I think.
Yeah, Veronica's messages are coming to me, but she says yes, but just with the sticky note option.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for both of you for letting me know. So, okay, with this in mind then, let's have a little quick Jamboard free-for-all. So Jamboard is this, it's a Google product. It's essentially a collaborative whiteboard, and you can do several things with it. So I see that the three of us are on the Jamboard. And so you have kind of several options of things you can use to draw. You can use a pen, and I'm going to, hopefully you can see me write pen on the board, so you can write things. You can make a little flower. You can erase things inefficiently, like I'm doing now. You can write a sticky note, and I'm just going to write the word banana and put it on a sticky note. You can insert images. You can definitely do that if you wish. Might be a little bit more complicated, but feel free to use that option. You can draw some images and you can write text. Let me write banana again. So you have kind of several different ways of kind of putting stuff onto the whiteboard. So before I start telling the story, yes, whoever did the laser pointer, that was awesome. Before I start telling the story, let's take like 30 seconds, a minute, get used to or become a bit more comfortable with the tools on Jamboard. They're there on the left-hand side. Just have a little free-for-all on the board, and I will join you in this. I'm going to draw a pineapple. Oh, whoever put the image of the banana, I like it.
That was me. I like this tool.
Yeah, it's quite cool in its own way. When I was teaching in the classroom, the students loved it. But I mean, for virtual, it's great. Yeah, it's an interesting experience the first time, though, I'm sure.
Emmy, Veronica asked in the chat, should we each pick a separate page? But I think we're just kind of testing out the platform right now, right?
Yes, correct. Thank you, Marlene, and apologies, Veronica. I'm sorry I didn't see that now. Yeah, just stay on the first one for now. We will be using separate pages, but just have a general play around to get comfortable with it. Let's take about another 30 seconds or so. Whoever put the coffee sticky, yes, me too. All righty. So I know we're likely still quite clunky with Jamboard. And to be honest, it's a virtual drawing tool, virtual whiteboard tool. So it's, you don't really have the level of finesse, shall we say, that one might have with like color pencils. But I find it amusing and and kind of nice to look at in its own way. So essentially what we just did with the typing and the drawing of various fruits and the incorporation of images and post-it notes and what have you, we are going to do the exact same thing as I tell my little short story. So since we have used this everyone together slide as our kind of getting used to things slide, let's all move over, if possible, to the slide that says first group. Ostensibly, there was going to be loads of storytelling groups, but there's just a few of us, so we can use the other pages. So if you go up to the top of the Jamboard page and you click on the right arrow, the first or the next whiteboard, I should say, that comes up is one that has first group on the top. And that is where we will do our little drawing for this short activity. Has everyone made it to the first group slide?
Yes.
Fab. Thank you.
I can't see you guys when I'm on the page.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, there's always there's always issues with virtual, but that's all right. You don't need to look at me while I'm telling the story. I will share a quick visual at the very beginning that might be nice to look at just because it's kind of amusing. But other than that, it's all going to be verbal. Okay, so any last minute questions? Are we all on the first group slide? Or else I'm gonna begin. Okay, and obviously it's a new experience for a lot of us. Do your best. It's not graded. It's not on the final exam. Alrighty then. Go for it.
Should we do stuff while you're telling, or should we listen first and then put some stuff on there?
Up to you. Ostensibly, while I'm telling it, you should kind of, draw and type kind of what comes to mind as the story is being told. However, if you prefer to kind of listen to the story first and then draw, that is okay too. We can take kind of, a minute or so after I finish telling it and kind of finish up. And I might draw something on the board too. Okay, let me share. Oh, I've lost my cursor. There we go. There you go. Okay, so the prompt that we're going to be working with today is the prompt, what is your happiest memory? So obviously there's a lot of responses to this particular prompt, what is your happiest memory? But in response to this prompt, I'm going to tell you all what my happiest memory is, or one of my happiest memories. So my happiest memory, as you can probably tell from this visual, is when I adopted my dog, Mallory. That's Mallory wearing the super cool goggles. I can't even say goggles today. So I adopted my dog, Mallory, about 4 years ago, going on 5 years ago, and I was living in South Africa. And when I was living in South Africa, I was living in Cape Town. And I'd reached the point in my life where I decided that, I have enough responsibility now. I have grown up enough. I have enough maturity to own a dog and to take care of a dog. And so I made this decision for myself. I'd wanted a dog for years. And I decided that, I reached a level of maturity where I could take care of another living creature. And so in this process of kind of figuring out how does one adopt a dog, I went to an animal shelter in Cape Town, in a kind of isolated part of Cape Town, where there wasn't a lot of public transport and stuff like that. I only had a scooter at the time. I did not have a car. And you might be able to, to anticipate how this story is going to go. But I went to the animal shelter, met the dog that would later become Mallory. His name was not Mallory at the time, it was Stark. And we met in this field kind of outside this animal shelter. And I have to be honest, I've never felt such a strong connection to another living creature like so immediately. Like you hear people talk about like love at first sight, and I've always been, really cynical and be like, ugh, that doesn't happen. But I really felt this connection to the dog that would later become Mallory immediately. We were both sitting in the field and he was brought out and he was let off the leash and he would like run in circles and then stop and sit next to me and lean against me. And then run in circles and then stop and sit next to me and lean against me. And so I met him a couple times in this field, and then I decided like, yes, this is the dog that is gonna come home with me. This is the dog I'm gonna look after. Now, as I mentioned, I didn't have a car in Cape Town. For reasons I, to be honest, no longer remember, did not or could not rent a car for that day. And all this to say that even if I had rented the car that day, I still would have had to transport Mallory at some point in the future on my scooter, which is the only form of transport I had. Public transport was an option, but it wasn't that great in that particular area of Cape Town. And so we were just gonna have to deal with it. And Mallory was gonna have to learn how to ride a scooter, which is this photo. So on the first day where, he came home with me, I went to the animal shelter. I said, I'm here to pick up my dog, who is now called Mallory. They brought him out, it was a lovely moment. I cried a little bit from joy. And then I went, okay, we're gonna have to go home now. And I had bought this bag that you can see there. It's a blue bag. That's specifically made to carry dogs on your back. And as well as the little, dog-sized goggles. But honestly, I really didn't know what I was getting into. Because Mallory also didn't know what was happening. Because as far as he knew, I get the impression that he kind of knew that he was being taken out of the animal shelter. I feel like dogs can sense that. But here was his new mom essentially going, okay, it's great to meet you. I'm going to take you home now, but first we need to get inside this bag, and then you need to get on my back, and then we need to go on this scooter ride through the windy kind of mountainous roads between kind of one side of Cape Town and the other, and then we're going to get home and it's going to be great. But really, bless his little soul, Mallory at first was like, no, but then got into it. As soon as I zipped up the bag, it's like the sort of bag where you put the feet in first and then it zips up and then you kind of flip them up and then you put them on your back. As soon as I zipped up that bag, Mallory was like, okay, this is happening now. And then the people at the animal shelter helped me, put him on my back, put his little goggles on to protect his eyes. And we took this photo right before I left. And I love this photo because you can see how happy we both are, but also you can see Mallory's character as well. He's a very adventurous dog, and I really didn't understand it at the time, but I should have guessed because I feel like only a really adventurous dog would look like that when he's on, his new mom's back for the first time and is about to go on the scooter ride. And we made it back home. And every time I would stop at a red light, he would like stick his head forward and like nuzzle the side of my helmet and nuzzle the side of my face. And then the light would turn green and I would speed off again and we got home safely. And the entire time we lived in South Africa, that was our mode of transport. But this is really my happiest memory because I feel like so much could have gone wrong, really, but it didn't. And it was really kind of the first kind of really significant bonding moment that my dog and I had. And, you know, loads of things have happened since then. You know, Mallory has come with me now that I live in Albuquerque. But especially on days where like I'm not feeling too great, with, you know, there have been quite a few because of the pandemic. I think back to this and I think just how happy we both were. Me super happy to have a dog finally, and Mallory super happy to be going home somewhere in a kind of really weird way that he probably was not expecting, but got used to, and started to really enjoy. So that is my happiest memory. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. I haven't, oh my gosh. I didn't even look over at the Jamboard until right now. I love the use of images. I also want a puppy. I have a dog already, but I do want a puppy too. Happiness. Oh, wonderful. Excellent. Thank you so much for both listening to my story and going on the Jamboard. Oh, and thank you, Veronica. Thank you. It's a story that brings me a lot of joy. So as you know, you were hearing me speaking, I'm sure you could tell that that wasn't like a pre-rehearsed story. That is just like me, honestly, just like responding to a prompt. And that's really all that you're trying to solicit from your students and yourself, you know, if and when you teach this lesson yourself. All you're really trying to solicit is memories and a story, even if it's not a super well-formed story, even if it doesn't, you know, follow that kind of story map. We're just trying to elicit is a response to a certain prompt. And that response can definitely vary depending on the prompt itself. So I've lost my cursor again. There we go. Okay, so now that we've kind of seen it in action a little bit, you guys are going to try it yourself. Now, originally, I was going to put everyone into breakout rooms, but there's only a few of us, so we might as well just stay in this room and do it kind of one by one. We are going to do exactly the same thing, except that you all are going to tell a story, and then all the rest of us, myself included, will be drawing on the Jamboard. So, some important things. The prompt is still, what is your happiest memory? We're going to have a little bit of time to kind of think about that. Don't worry, I'm not going to drop you in without any thinking time. And same thing, you know, give your students some time to process the provided prompt. However they wish, you know, they can diagram the story on a piece of paper, they can take visual notes, they can go off, you know, somewhere and kind of talk it through to themselves, whatever works. Just a little bit of time for them to kind of, you know, think, okay, what memories does this prompt elicit? And then each student gets a set amount of time, about 5 minutes or so. We're going to take 5 minutes, although really it's flexible. It can be less, it can be a bit more. To tell their story, well, as we've just seen, the other students draw the responses on a piece of paper. This can be done on a piece of like mural paper, it can be done on a Jamboard, there's options. And as a reminder, there is no correct way to tell or to respond to a story. As long as you're being respectful, a listening atmosphere is maintained, and students remain on task, that's really all we're looking for at this stage. So before I kind of give some more specific instructions on how this will run in this particular setting, any questions?
I have a question.
Go for it.
So I'm thinking about, I have a class coming up in January that I've never taught before. I haven't really been an adult teacher, and it's going to be on Zoom. So of course I'm thinking, oh, this would be a really good tool. if you have any resources for how to use this tool, like for example, can you, like, let's say there's 5 students in the class, can each student have a page like on that board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. Essentially what Jamboard is, it's kind of like like if you know Google Slides, you know, like the Google PowerPoint kind of
Yeah.
version. It's essentially presented as that, just with the ability for people to kind of like draw on each slide,
Yeah.
rather than, you know, rather than not. But yes, so as long as, how can I say this? So in order to make a Jamboard file, you'll need a Google account. But other than that, you can make it as many pages as you want. I believe the limit on how many people can work on it at once is like 50 people at once, on one kind of like master file. But yes, definitely. And I can actually make a note. I don't know if this is helpful to you, Michelle, but if it is, I'm happy to send through like a tutorial or something like that.
I would love that.
Awesome. Yeah, I can definitely do that. If you don't mind just sticking your email in the chat box. And I can send you what I used when I was kind of learning Jamboard at the beginning of the pandemic. That might be helpful. And Veronica, if that is helpful to you too, I'm happy to send that through to you as well. Awesome. Thank you, both of you. Cool. I will send that through most likely on Monday, if that works for you. But I'm happy to do so. Cool. Thank you very much for that question, Michelle. Any other questions before we get started, or before I give you more detailed instructions? Okay, fantastic. So, slightly awkward transition time. Whoopsies, too fast. Okay. So if we could both, or all of us, oh no, I think we've lost Veronica. Hopefully she will be able to make it back. But if we could, just like we moved to the slide that said first group at the top, if we could move to the slide that says second group on the top. And we will draw our stuff on there. And if you can just give me a thumbs up once you made it to the second group. Fab. Okay. So, hopefully Veronica will be able to jump back in. If not, Michelle and Marlene, just us. So the prompt is, what is your happiest memory? Marlene, if you wish to participate, you are of course more than welcome. Although you don't have to, you know, up to you. Prompt is, what is your happiest memory? We're gonna do 3 minutes to brainstorm. I'll set myself a little timer on my phone here. And then we're gonna do 5 minutes-ish for the first person to tell the story, 1 minute to transition, you know, finish off your drawings. We can have a look at them, move on to the next slide. 5 minutes for the next person to tell the story, 1 minute to transition, and then hopefully Veronica will be back. And then kind of last story set. Please ignore this thing at the bottom of the screen where it says, I will send out an announcement when it's time to switch. We're not in breakout rooms, so we'll just stay here. And to be honest, I'm just going to kind of let you talk. I might, when there's about 1 minute remaining, I'll hold up a finger. But I don't really like cutting people off. So, you know, tell the story for as long as you need to. Just keep in mind that 5 minutes is probably like a good balance, just so we can, you know, keep ourselves moving and have a Saturday and stuff like that. It says done telling one story and still have time left, tell another. Again, that's kind of more pertinent for the breakout room sessions. I wouldn't worry about that too much. Once you feel you're done, that's totally cool. You can say I'm done. We can have a look at the Jamboard. Okay, so 3 minutes to brainstorm, and then 5 minutes to tell. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if you are feeling confident and you wish to be the person that goes first, you don't need to tell me now, but just have a think whether you'd be confident and want to go first. 3 minutes or so to brainstorm. What is your happiest memory? And then I will bring us back. I'll let us know when we've got 1 minute or so.
You want us to brainstorm on the Jamboard?
That's a good question. You don't need to,
Okay.
unless you absolutely want to. You can brainstorm in your head, on paper, somewhere else, whatever works for you. Okay, 1 minute or so left for the brainstorming. All righty. Finishing up last thoughts. Last brainstorming thoughts. Okay, so would anyone like to go first?
I can go first.
Thank you, Michelle.
We don't have Veronica anymore. She must have had to take her kid home from karate.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. But thank you very much for volunteering. Marlene and I will draw your story to the best of our ability.
Okay.
Okay, whenever you're ready. And I'll hold up my finger when there's 1 minute remaining, but again, take all your time you need. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, so this story is about the birth of my daughter, which definitely was literally the happiest moment of my life. And I'm not thinking of that in retrospect. I remember the moment when she was born, and I remember it being the happiest moment in my life. I was at home, and I lived walking distance to the hospital. Of course, we had a car. And it actually wasn't my due date. It was a couple weeks before my due date. And I had really gone crazy with the, what do you call it? When pregnant women start to nest. I had gone crazy with the nesting, and I did a lot of cleaning and organizing and carrying boxes. I mean, I probably did initiate the going into labor early because I did all this physical work. So I go to sleep, and I wake up, and I have labor pains. We go to the hospital, they send me home, and then they say, you know, you're gonna have to wait until you're more ready to have the baby. But when it was the morning and it was clear that it was time to go, I couldn't get in the car because it was just too painful. I couldn't bend my body to get in the car. So it was my husband at the time and my best friend, Demetra, and they were both on either side of me with our arms hooked, walking to the hospital. And I had taken a Lamaze class for natural childbirth. And the people in the class were really, that was just really the culture of the class, that natural childbirth was the very best thing to do. And I kind of liked the idea of natural childbirth. I mean, I didn't really, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But when I felt the pain of as we were walking to the hospital, and I felt the pain of the contractions, which I don't know if any of you have had babies, but it's a new kind of feeling. Most people probably haven't had that feeling before. It was new for me, and it was so strong. And I became indignant on the walk to the hospital about the idea that all these people were going to have their babies without any medicine. And I immediately turned against natural childbirth. And I said the F word many times. F word, natural childbirth. I was so mad. So we get to the hospital, and I do all the things, and it's a few hours, and it's painful. But I said, I want the anesthesiologist, and he comes, and he's this really cool guy with like a bandana on and tattoos. And my friend knew the hospital because she was an intern there. And she said, yeah, that he's a cool guy, and he's a pot smoker. I remember that was what was considered a cool guy back then. And he did my epidural, and it worked perfectly, which they don't always. And it gave me just the right amount of relief that I was able then to like joyfully birth my daughter. And when she was born, there were a whole bunch of people in the room because my whole family was there, and I had friends there, and they were all in the hospital room. And when the doctor told them that it was time for them to leave the room, instead they just took a few steps backward and plastered themselves against the wall. Nobody left because it was such a mesmerizing experience. So I had like 12 people watch me give birth. And and when my daughter came out, and it was a girl, and everybody knew that I wanted a girl for other reasons that are another story, but I wanted a girl, and everybody cheered. It was like, it's a girl. And the doctor said that my its experience was like a Mariners game, that there was actual cheering. And I remember just the second after she was born, I just turned to my husband, her father. I want another one. I said that immediately. I want another one. And it was really, really the happiest, that acute happiness at that time. The end. Thank you for listening.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much for that story. It's wonderful. What a happy memory. I don't know if you've been looking at or you're able to see what Marlene and I have been drawing.
Hold on.
Or even interpret it. I'm horrible at drawing, and the Jamboard does not correct for that.
I like that. Clean all the things. Oh, natural childbirth. Oh my God, I love this, you guys. It's so good. Dr. Bandana.
Oh my gosh. Oh no, that was such a wonderful story. I don't know if you saw me shake my head. I've never had children. I don't even know, like it's a totally foreign experience to me. But you told that so eloquently with like so much like emotional like ups and downs, and oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I feel honored. That was a wonderful story.
It's funny because childbirth is the one thing that we kind of, when we get pregnant, we've literally making the decision that you're going to have a like pretty violent experience with your body. And it's, I had been afraid of that my whole life. I mean, I always knew I wanted to have a baby and I was afraid.
Yeah.
And then when it came time, the second you get pregnant, you're like, wow, I've actually voluntarily stepped into this arena. And I ended up having a very good experience. Not everybody does,
Yeah.
but it's nice to be able to know that many people have good experiences. And so when you do get pregnant, if anybody decides to do that, that there's a possibility that it will go really well. And my daughter was also, she was very small when she was born. She grew big immediately, but she had a perfectly round head that I think made it easier. And she was only 5.5 pounds. And, but they knew that she had the skeleton of a bigger person. And now she's 5'10".
Wow.
And, yeah.
Wow. I hope she is proud of her very, kind of spherical head, like that she was, she had that, and therefore made the birthing process a bit easier. Wow.
I've always thought round heads were nice. I don't have one. I have a pointy head.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever consciously thought about the shape of my own skull until literally this moment. I'll need to ask my mother, how was my head?
Well, your hair is so short now that I can tell that you have kind of a round head.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Hopefully that made the process easier for my mother. It's not the raising process, the birthing process. Oh no, thank you so much, Michelle. That was so wonderful. If you want, I can definitely when I send you the Jamboard stuff, I can send you like a PDF of this if you would like.
Yeah,
I mean, I know it's kind of ridiculous, but I'm definitely happy to send it to you if you would like to have a copy of Marlene and I's
okay,
interesting drawing skills.
I'm very much interested in, my students that I'm going to have, I don't know, it's going to be Spanish 3 and they will only have had 2 quarters and it's only once a week. So I don't know how much language they will have. So I'm kind of interested in how to tell stories very basic, like at a low
Mm.
level, low language level?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Probably the best way would be to adapt the prompts to be quite specific
Yeah.
to obviously, what has already been covered. And I don't know, how you feel about allowing students to use other languages in a foreign language classroom. But that might also be a good way to kind of, depending on their level, to bridge the gap
Yeah.
between their ability, to communicate in Spanish and their ability to do so, in another language. I don't know if this is useful information, but it's something that comes to mind. I could see this working quite well as like an icebreaker activity, as like a first kind of, first couple lessons, while everyone's still getting to know each other, perhaps with the, both as a way of kind of like understanding a bit more in depth, kind of, how comfortable students are with Spanish, but also to break the ice and also to kind of, get them conversing and feeling comfortable, sharing with each other.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that help? I don't know if that does.
Yeah. I mean, it does. And we'll see. I think I'm going to have to use only Spanish in the class because it's only 2 hours once a week.
Oh, wow.
That will be the only input they'll be getting. I don't know. It's a new experience. I didn't really even expect to have this job. It's going to be teaching remotely, and it's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. No, best of luck. If there's anything, that we can be of, that we can maybe help out with, obviously we have loads of lesson plans and what have you. Please, feel free to reach out, and we're more than happy to, if we don't know, we can try and find someone who does know. Congratulations for that job. And I'm sure it'll go well, I'm sure, once the kind of the bump of Zoom awkwardness is gotten over, that it'll go smoothly.
Now, have you both work for the University of New Mexico, right?
Yes.
And have you been language teachers, or are you or no?
I haven't had a dedicated language classroom, although I'm TESOL certified.
Okay.
But I was teaching, when I was in the classroom, I was teaching social studies.
Okay.
So US history, geography, and world history, and then I was doing the film studies dual credit course.
Mhm. And
if-
Marlene, how about you?
I'm not an educator actually, so I just coordinate the outreach for the Latin American and Iberian Institute at UNM.
Okay.
So we're very lucky to have Emmy with the experience to add to it. So
Do you guys know why there's not more people in this class? Because I feel like I've gone to some things before through you guys, and it seemed like there were a lot more people before.
yeah, I think everyone's just kind of experiencing like just fatigue right now. I mean, I coordinate the K-12 program, but I also coordinate like our just like generic lectures on behalf of our faculty to the public, and I've seen the same thing. Our numbers have just kind of waned a little bit towards the end of the year. I think people are just kind of tired, and they'll sign up. We had several people register for the class
Okay.
for
Good.
today's workshop, but I think when it comes down to it, a lot of people are just kind of like, I'd rather not spend another couple hours over Zoom. So yeah,
I really appreciate that you guys have these kinds of things.
thank you. Yeah, and it's always we always just kind of plan for whatever, but as long as even one person attending is a win for us, because we can kind of expand our reach. So
Mhm. And you both live in New Mexico?
yep, yeah, in Albuquerque.
In Albuquerque, and the university is in Albuquerque.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So given that we're just kind of a few of us,
Yeah.
we can, Marlene, unless you would like, I definitely don't want to stop you from telling a story if you want to tell a story. No, okay.
It's okay. No.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But Michelle, thank you very much for telling yours. And thank you for being up for it, Marlene. I feel like I put you on the spot there. But we can probably kind of wrap this up so that we can all, I don't know, have a Saturday. A quick question though, and I'm generally interested in this answer because I feel like people always have kind of different ways of thinking about this or experiencing this. So what did you enjoy more? The process of telling a story or listening to a story, and why? Feel free to unmute, put it in.
Well, I enjoyed listening to your story. And if there were more people in the class, that would have been cool too, to hear different kinds of stories. And it just makes me really think about prompts of stories and what kind of prompt to have that will make it easier for people to think of stories. Kids love to tell stories. And one of the challenges as a Spanish teacher is that they would get really excited and they would really want to tell their story in English because they just didn't have strong enough skills to really tell it in Spanish. And sometimes I would let them, but sometimes I wouldn't because it wouldn't be in Spanish. And that excitement that they feel, I would like to try to find a way to kind of get that excitement, because it's like when you get to speak your own native language, you get, super excited about talking. But as we know that with speaking a second language, we have that like affective filter that kind of suppresses our emotion. It's scarier, right? You don't feel as comfortable unless you're bilingual. And so I'm just really, I like this whole idea, and I like the Jamboard. I'm really thinking maybe I would like to try using that when I'm teaching this class. Yeah.
Awesome. No, thank you, Michelle. It's really lovely to hear. To answer your question on, I don't know, it's not even answering a question. But I was just, when you mentioned, that excitement that students feel when they say a story in their own native language, and then, having to use a language that they're learning is kind of like dampened down a bit.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. This has worked for me, but not in that specific context. Like I've found that for students for whom telling stories is like a little bit scary, like in their native language, more kind of brainstorming and planning time, as well as like smaller groups or purposely putting them in groups, with people they trust. That has definitely helped. How to foster that excitement though, that's tough. That's tough.
I think I'm also a substitute teacher, and I think in January I'm going to substitute a kindergarten class. And so I think when the other woman was there, what was her name?
Veronica, I believe.
Veronica.
Yes.
I had wanted to ask her. I would love to have some suggestions of stories to tell to kindergartners, because I'm just realizing that I would like to do that when I'm substituting their classes.
Oh, that's a good question. So, I don't know, hopefully this is helpful information, but we have a blog you may have seen called Vamos a Leer, where we kind of review and write book guides and resource guides for various children's literature for all ages.
Oh, what's it called?
Vamos a Leer. Oh, thank you, Marlene.
Oh yeah, Vamos a Leer. I feel like I get emails. I have a really hard time organizing electronic stuff. I never know, but I definitely get emails from Vamos a Leer, and I actually purchased a book that was mentioned on there. It was called 21 Primos, 21 Cousins.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And my neighbor has it right now. He's reading it. Because he wants to learn Spanish. But yeah, can you put how I find the blog in the chat box?
I believe Marlene has, oh, good. Yeah, Marlene has stuck it in the chat box. And she's also put the educational resource link as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, the first link is the blog, and then that second link is a list of all of our literature guides, and it's divided by, it's organized by grade level, and we have a couple of picture books. They're both by Duncan Tonatiu, and those are some really great Latin American themed books, but they're in English, so they're not necessarily.
So can I click on these links when we end the class? Will they still be here, or should I copy and paste them into something?
I think I think the chat will close. On that right hand, if you can open up the chat, there's this where you kind of type your message.
Mhm.
On the far right, there's the little thing for emoticons, and then there's 3 little dots. If you click on that, you should be able to save the chat.
Save chat. Where does it save to?
I think it just saves to somewhere on your computer. I'm not sure where it saves, but it's it saves it onto your computer.
I'm gonna just make it easier for myself, copy and paste these links.
Perfect, yeah. And then you can always just reach out to either of us and just say, hey, what was that thing that you were talking about? And we'll lead you to the right direction. So
Okay. There I have the one. Hold on, I'm just quickly. I just find technology overwhelming. Like it's just, I don't know, the way we started using it, it was people that were not experts. The whole trajectory of using technology for the last 30 years, it was like non-experts teaching people. So I think that's why, like for my age, it's a little harder. But you guys are younger, and I think that probably you had experts teaching you. But anyway,
I'm trying to remember whether I did. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also like technology is just grown exponentially. I feel like, especially in the last 5 years or something, I'm reaching the point where I'm like, oh, what, something new now? Okay.
I know, it just was easier when we just had one way of doing things. Now there's multiple ways of doing everything. And that, I find that overwhelming.
Yeah.
Just like we used to have typewriters, and there was just one way to type, and you just did it. You learned how to type, and then now we have, a zillion, text boxes and sticky notes and word processors and Google slides and
yeah, there's just there's a lot more now. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but it seems like there's a lot more now. It's just a lot more information, data,
and for people who want stuff concrete, there's just not one concrete right way to do things anymore. And so it's those of us who are concrete, it's harder for us. Just tell me the one way. What's the one best way?
Speaking of concrete, I will send you a Jamboard tutorial on Monday. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciated and enjoyed meeting you guys.
Likewise. Let me close this and let me put some stuff in the chat box. So we've got, I keep losing my cursor. There we go. If having this kind of written down is useful, we have a PDF of the lesson plan, which I'll stick in the chat box. And then we mentioned, or I was going to mention at the end of the presentation, that we have some podcast guides for Radio Ambulante.
Oh, I've listened to that before too.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I listened to one that was about a blind guy. It was in Spanish.
Yeah.
You're in Spanish, right?
Yeah, they're all in Spanish. I think so. I think they're all. in
Are you
Spanish.
guys Spanish speakers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And these podcast guys are a little bit older, but they're still, they're still relevant and, might be useful perhaps for the class you're teaching.
I'm gonna put that in my notes too. There we go. I know when Veronica said that she wasn't a Spanish speaker, she might be a heritage speaker where she just knows some language from her family. And it makes me like, I just wish there were more heritage speaker resources for people, because there are so many people of the younger generation that don't speak, especially Spanish speakers, and they don't speak the language of their grandparents. And it's something that they are missing out on.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm gonna make a note because we're always looking for suggestions of things to provide, and that's a very good point. And I, as far as I know, I don't think we have any dedicated resources for it.
And I think it's the University of Texas. I think they have a whole heritage speaker. I belong to something. So that would be a resource. But I think that, like, just thinking about this young woman who's teaching pre-K, and she could be using Spanish if she knew it. And I bet she really wishes that she did. And that would be so nice for teachers to be able to use that as their like continuing education credits, like to keep your certificate going.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you very much for that suggestion. I made a note. We're constantly looking for ideas of what to provide. And so, yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Because that's a point. I don't think I don't think I see many resources specifically for heritage speakers, generally.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story as well. And especially on a Saturday morning.
And Emmy, what is your position at you guys are at the University, right, of New Mexico? What's your position?
I'm the K through 12 education program coordinator.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And then Marlene, you are?
I'm the communication and outreach coordinator. So,
okay.
So I just kind of manage all things outreach and communication within the Latin American and Iberian Institute, which is an institute within the University of New Mexico.
Okay.
So, and Michelle, you're on our, I'm assuming that you're on our newsletter list already.
I mean, I must be if I found out about this class, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, that's why I figured. Yeah. But just to give you just kind of a sneak peek into next semester, we'll be doing kind of like a themed semester of workshops, and they're all going to be virtual, so you'll be able to tune in if you'd like. And they'll all be related to environmental justice, with a large kind of focus on indigeneity within environmental justice. So, so just keep an eye out for those newsletters. We'll pick them back up here probably in January or February. And yeah, so we have an exciting semester already kind of planned out for next year. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
You too.
You
Okay.
too. Have a great holiday.
Take care. Thank you so much.